Okay, so hey guys, welcome to episode 1 of Breaking the Monolith Podcast. So I just decided to revamp the entire thing, and a good friend of mine, Dylan, agreed to do the first episode with me. So just really quickly, Dylan, give a brief background of who you are, what you do, all that good stuff.
Yeah, of course. So my name's Dylan. I go to the University of South Carolina. I'm a junior there, and I'm the president of the Turning Point chapter on campus.
Yeah, how is that, by the way, being a Turning Point chapter president?
It's going well. It's going well for sure. We had an incident earlier this semester where there were some opposing groups on campus that tried to get us kicked off, but we got through that because at the end of the day, our freedom of speech always wins.
Yeah, I've been through that before, so
Yeah.
it's always good to prevail. But today's topic is, I usually like to forget that those emails, but I usually do like debates and stuff. But Dylan is a friend, and we pretty much have like a lot of the same values and perspectives. But he had a really, unique, because I'm like really big on capitalism, but I like to identify more as like a laissez-faire capitalist. And correct me if I'm wrong, you identify more as a state capitalist, correct?
Yeah, because I don't want absolutely zero government intervention when it comes to the economy. I think you need some, but I would want it to be limited. I don't want it to be overbearing. For instance, when the government comes in and tells you, oh, you have to be vaccinated or you lose your job, that's pretty far over my line.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So let me get through this really quickly. So leave comments down below in the comment section. Tell me if you guys like me to kind of leave this up, when I'm doing podcasts with guests and stuff, or is it like too much and you would rather see more of our face? But you can go follow Dylan right here. His Instagram handle is right there at Dylan Baldassarre, correct?
Yeah.
But that is his page right there. So go follow him, give him a follow. And this is my Instagram as well. And make sure you subscribe and turn on post notifications.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on my account as well. I post and share a lot of things. I'm sharing my opinions all the time, so it's good.
For sure. And
also,
sorry. No,
also, if you couldn't already tell by my accent, I am from the Northeast, specifically from New York. So.
Oh no, you didn't have to say that. The first time I met him, I already knew.
Yeah.
Wait, are you Italian? Because you have like an Italian, okay, yeah, I thought so. Yeah, but I'm libertarian. He's conservative. And just really quick before we get into the topic, because I want to make sure that both of us are, properly and respectfully represented in like our capitalist views and stuff. So, like I said, he's a state capitalist. I'm a laissez-faire capitalist, and a state capitalist state capitalism, I should say, is an economic system in which private capitalism is modified by a varying degree of government ownership and control. So we're not talking like full-on government, but we're talking about just small elements of government. Did I get that correct?
Yeah.
All right. So laissez-faire capitalism, I should say, is an economic philosophy of free market capitalism that opposes government intervention, and the theory of laissez-faire was developed by French physiocrats during the 18th century and believes that economic success is more likely to, to thrive without government intervention, just to say. And I guess to get into the discussion, the question is, should the government have power in the free market? And before we get into discussion, I'm going to stop sharing so you guys can see us more on the screen, because apparently I'm small and he's small on the screen. So let's make us bigger. So.
All right,
there we go. So I guess you could start us off. Dylan, you're the guest. So should the government have, power in free market economy?
Well, I think it should definitely have some power, not like overbearing power, but I think there has to be some regulations in place. We have laws against monopolies and price fixing and things like that. Things would be detrimental to the overall economy. And we've seen it happen throughout history when too much financial power is consolidated, whether it be under the government or under corporations and monopolies. It does an overall detriment to a country and its people.
I think that's a good response. So this is my question to you, because, just feel to, come in whenever you want to. So I believe that we should privatize everything, the entire economy, all aspects of this country, any economy. That's what I believe, whether it's education, police, law enforcement. I'm like anti-central banks, but that's a different story. But the reason I said it is because I just don't see government having the potential to maximize the benefits and incentives within a system such as like education, for example. I think education should be privatized. It should not have no government whatsoever, because I think people, consumers, should have the right to choose what kind of education they want, the quality of education. I think they should have a say so of what should and should not be taught. And I just think when you have government, just even a little like little bits of government, it doesn't matter how much. I just feel like it restricts the ability to go anywhere. It restricts growth. So let's start right there. What do you think?
Well, I actually agree with a lot of what you said about education. I don't know if it's exactly practical to completely privatize it, but I do support school choice where, your zip code doesn't determine where you have to go to school and you can choose which school you want to go to. In terms of completely privatizing it, I feel like you could run into a problem where it becomes, you have to pay your way through the education system, which is wrong. I think, when it comes to our youth, everyone's entitled to a basic education.
I believe so too, but don't you think in a free market economy, especially under capitalism, don't you think that without government, don't you think cost competition will pretty much, alleviate any of those, concerns that you have? I mean, if let's say school A is like $10,000 and school B is like $5,000. But both are good resources. They have good quality education, but a lot of low income or, people who don't have a lot of funds tend to, gravitate more towards the less expensive school. So now school A is like, we need students. We're a school, we need students. So now they lower their cost to like $1,000 annually, which is like $500 per semester. So now they're like intrinsically taking, people from like school B over. So that's the point I'm making. Like, what about price competition?
Yeah, I mean, you already do see that because we have private schools in America right now, and you do see that to a certain extent. But if you take government out of it completely, right, and you don't have laws against things like price fixing, and what price fixing is that basically every member or player in a certain industry, they come together and they agree to set a certain price, and that price can be super high so they can maximize their profits, and people basically have to pay it. So if, let's say, all the schools in a certain area come together, right, and they're going to say, okay, we're going to get together and we're all going to charge this much, and they have to pay or else they don't get an education. I feel like that's a problem you could run into.
Okay, so I have a question. So what about like in low income areas? And I know a lot of people are concerned about the quality of education in like low income Black and brown communities. A lot of the tax dollars that fund the education system are coming from like low income households. A lot of money are not going into this, it's not going into the system. A lot of parents, they're not bringing in enough money annually to even, provide their child with a decent education. So like, how do you fix that issue when, you already have, this government-based education and, it's not really doing anything, it's been funded, but there's not enough funds. So I mean, how do you fix that situation? What is the solution to something like that?
I mean, that's one of the toughest issues our country faces is education, and that's why on the world stage we're far from number one because our schools are not run correctly. And I don't know if that's necessarily a problem of the fact that they're public, or more so that our dollars, our tax dollars, are not being allocated in the right way, and our resources are not being allocated in the right way. And I think you could run into the same problems even if it is privatized. I think we need better teachers. We need to stop giving teachers tenure because when you give teachers tenure, they don't have an incentive to teach. They don't have an incentive to be engaged with their students. They're handed a curriculum and they basically recite it word for word, and they don't have an incentive to help students actually learn.
So that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up too, because even when it comes to education and teachers and government, especially like public school teachers, they don't really have a say so in what's being taught. They, like you said, they're being handed a curriculum and things like that. That's also why I'm for like privatizing education, because I think if you go to school, you get certified, get all these specialties to become a teacher. I think it is your natural obligation to teach whatever you want, how you want, at a decent. I mean, you're a teacher, you're an educator. Like, it's your job. So why are you being regulated? So that's also the reason. So I don't know. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree with that. I think what we're seeing going on with, critical race theory being pushed in schools. I think the problem is when you have the control of the curriculum is in the wrong hands, right? there shouldn't be a set, unified, like strict, you can't deviate from this at all. But I feel like there has to be a set of standards for education, because otherwise a private school could go off and really go off the deep end. You could look at it from the other end and say, okay, well, we have the freedom to teach whatever the hell we want. We're going to go all the way in on critical race theory and all these different things. And so it could work to the benefit of society. You could teach skills that are beneficial, like financials and the intricacies of our government and civic duty and things like that, things that aren't taught in schools right now that should be. Or you could completely go in the other direction and just teach garbage.
I can't say I agree, but I definitely get the point.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting conversation because I actually never met, you were the first conservative that I've met, you know, I don't even want to say first because I mean, you see them on like TV a lot, but
yeah,
I don't know. So like when it comes to free, and that's why I try to understand with conservatives, because they always like promote like free market and like economic liberties and things like that. What is a free market? Like, is a free market even a free market if it has elements of government in it? That's the first question. Like, how can it even,
Oh, yeah. Well,
no, go
continue.
ahead. Go ahead. It's good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So basically, I don't think a market is truly free if whether it's consolidated under government or consolidated under corporations. I think a free market is where you have the majority of citizens that have, you know, financial freedom and financial leverage. And you don't see that when you don't have any government intervention. It has to be somewhat of a balance to actually get what I would believe is a true free market, and what America has and what America has had for most of its history. And it's why, you know, we have some of the highest standards of living in the world and in human history.
Okay, so let's say that all that is objectively true right now. So what about in the case when government imposed taxes on like the free market economy? Like you say, oh, government is okay, it's good in some cases, but the government is like, oh, we need to impose some taxes to help supplement some certain things. Like, doesn't that pretty much debunk the whole like the purpose of a free market when you have the government coming in regulating, you know, whatever they feel like, imposing taxes on whatever they feel like, you know, like even when it comes to like antitrust laws, that's a big one too, because I know you mentioned a bit ago about like monopolies and things like that. And I actually don't think monopolies are a bad thing, but that's a discussion for another day. But you can answer that question. But my other question that kind of goes into all this, don't you think with government and the free market that it pretty much restricts the ability to just innovate? Like, how can we have maximized the potential for innovation when government is involved, like, you know, medical developments and groundbreaking scientific, you know, discoveries, or, you know, just different things like that. Like, it is not, I'm calling me a pessimist because I don't know. I don't trust the government,
Yeah.
but how do we?
I don't either. Don't get it twisted. I don't trust them completely either, but I do think it is a necessary institution to have some involvement in the free market. But like I said, not a lot. So to your point about, you know, them coming in and imposing a bunch of taxes, I think a lot of our taxes go way too far. If you look at how the corporate tax rate at one point, it was 35%. That's insane. I mean, that's a significant portion of a company's income. I don't think that's good. I think that stifles innovation. I agree with that part. But to your point about if we have a completely laissez-faire economy, I think that also stifles innovation. Because if you have one or two entities that are in control of the entire market, right? What reason, what incentive do they have to provide a quality product to the public when there's no competition?
Well, I have to disagree because if it's a laissez-faire economy, which means the complete absence of government, there's no such thing as government regulations. Corporations can pretty much do whatever they want to do, but a corporation cannot exist without a consumer base. Consumers pretty much have the power to regulate the economy. So if consumers are unsatisfied, you know, not satisfied, I should say, with the way corporations are, you know, doing things, then now that opens up room for more competition to come in. Like, hey guys, like, talking to the consumers, I have a better product, I have a better solution, I'm more affordable, I'm less oppressive. Like, I really believe that, you know, I think people are so complacent with government and they're like really content with what the government, it's really hard to explain, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I think consumers regulate the market, and I think consumers hold the power, and I think consumers pretty much they have corporations in a chokehold in a laissez-faire economy. That's how I look at it, and maybe you look at it differently. But I guess the whole point, I just want to understand, minus the cons, I want to know the pros. What do you like? What is the benefit of government in your eyes and Dylan's point of view? What does government do? How can it benefit the free market economy? How can it benefit consumers? Like, what's the benefit? Like, what argument can you give us to, make an appeal? I'm all ears, yeah.
The benefit would be there's more competition, and therefore that drives down prices. And I know you said in a laissez-faire it opens it up for competition as well, but I would have to disagree with that, because when you have an industry that controls all the resources, right, to even make a product, how do you penetrate that market where, first of all, you don't have the financial capital to compete with that. It's like saying I want to go up against Nike. Like, yeah, I could create a clothing line that, maybe I make some sales, but it's not going to compete with Nike.
Because they're like a capital.
What?
Because they're like a capital.
Yes.
So what about like during the Gilded Age with like, are you familiar with like Henry Ford and, his?
Yeah.
Didn't have all the resources, didn't have, everything that he needed. The automobile industry was heavily regulated, but he did it. He prevailed and he became an industry captain. Look at what he did, and look at now one of the biggest motor companies in the country right now. And, he innovated the car industry, but he did it all with minimum government. During the Gilded Age, it was, I don't want to say that it was the complete absence of government, but definitely during the Gilded Age, there was less government, it was less regulated. But I mean, this goes to show that there is potential when you see people like Henry Ford, or even people like Madam C.J. Walker. She was the first African-American woman who was a millionaire. Was it millionaire, billionaire, something like that? But you know what I mean. But racism was big at the time. The hair industry, I guess in terms of monopoly, white folks pretty much monopolized the entire, hair industry during the time. But look at what she did. Look at the power that she held. She found a consumer base. There were people who wanted this particular product, because I mean, you have to find something that's trendy, something in the market. You have to find something and I guess go from there. But I just think this idea that, when, we think that because monopolies have a certain power or they have a certain control over something, that means that it's, it means that we can't go anywhere. It means that there's no way that we can create a new market. There's, therefore we need government. So I guess that would be my argument to that, because there are instances in history where people, couldn't get into certain industries because of what we call monopolies, but they did. So I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I would argue yes. I mean, the examples you brought up, that's legitimate, right? That was during the Gilded Age. That was where you had a lot of monopolies controlling the automobile industry. That's true. I'm not saying it's completely impossible, but I'm saying it makes it a hell of a lot more difficult. That would be my answer to that. And the other thing would be, even once you do penetrate that market, what's to stop you from now? Now I'm big as well. So now I'm going to fall into the trap. Now I'm going to, get together with these other huge corporations, decide to set a price and be like, and basically control the supply.
And it's very interesting that you say that, especially as a conservative, because I know a lot of conservatives are really big on like free market, like policies and like capitalism, very big on that stuff. But I think now the discussion should kind of turn into like morals and ethics, because now it sounds a little bit, would you argue that capitalism sort of leads people down this path of becoming these economic tyrants and putting chokeholds on certain industries, and pretty much it's like anti-humanitarian? Would you argue that is essentially what capitalism is? Because it sounds like your concern with capitalism is the unethical stuff that comes with it. So would that be your argument, or what would you have to say for
I
that?
wouldn't say that's exactly my argument. I think capitalism is, the best system that we have. If you have the government really stepping in and controlling the means of production, that's a hell of a lot worse than laissez-faire. That at that point, you really have no semblance of a free market whatsoever. But I also think a free market in its pure sense makes consumers less free. So I always will support capitalism. I am a capitalist, but a state capitalist. I don't think capitalism is immoral. I think capitalism is successful due in part that it does play to human nature. You know, people are selfish, and I think that's fine. But I also think that we shouldn't be trampling on small business either. And that's what we saw happen with the corporations and I'm talking about like the top 1% of the 1%.
And it's so interesting that you say that though, because essentially capitalism is about individualism. It's about finding what you like and making capital off of it. In my opinion, capitalism is selfish, but selfish doesn't always mean bad.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Selfish doesn't always mean bad. You're in the market, you found something, you work hard for, you built a big business, and so what if you built a corporation off of it? So you have the best product in the industry.
No, I agree with that. The problem arises when these unethical practices start happening that hurt consumers, that make consumers have to pay more. You know, in a monopoly, you have certain cases where they will control the supply, right? So the supply goes down, they artificially lower the supply to boost up the prices because the less of a product you have, the more valuable it is.
So you like capitalism until you don't like capitalism. And by that, I mean, capitalism is good as long as it doesn't trample on you. Is that basically?
Until not just me, but consumers are all over the country in general. And until it creates an economic downturn or even exacerbates an economic downturn like we saw in the Great Depression. In the Great Depression, you know, the stock market crashed, right? And then that was exacerbated by you had all these monopolies in place, and they're still sitting there. They're just like, fuck everybody. We have complete control over the market, and we're gonna charge ridiculous prices, despite the fact that a lot of people, you know, it's impossible for them to afford them. And I'm not talking about luxury goods mainly. I'm talking about essential goods, shit that people need,
right?
Like food and housing. And when you have complete control over the market and people can't afford those things, it's a net. What's the word?
So I think this is. I get what you're.
It's a net bad for
okay.
Country.
So I think I get what you're saying, but okay. So I think your argument is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are a state capitalist and you are a capitalist organically because you believe that people should have economic and financial freedom, but you think that there should be some elements of protection in place.
Yes.
Why should there be elements of protection in place from the people who do very poorly at protecting people? Like government, for example, you say to protect them from like corporations and things like that. Do you know that it's the government that provide like subsidies to these giant corporations? And it was just the federal government that did bailouts during like bailed out.
I agree with you on all of that.
They're contributing to the issues that, you know, they're contributing to the issues that you're against. So it's, you know, help me understand.
That's true.
Like the federal government bailing out Wall Street, like what the hell does Wall Street need a bailout for? Like
I know, I agree with you on that. We should have never bailed out the banks. I'm not saying the government has done a good job in regulating the economy. By being a state capitalist, I'm not saying,
I know what you mean. And
we have a state capitalist economy and it's going great because it's a state capitalist economy. That's not what I'm saying at all, because our government's completely incompetent.
So I guess maybe I'm still just not getting it, because I thought what you mean was, okay, so I thought that you meant that, you know, you're a capitalist, you support capitalism, state capitalism, because, you know, financial, economic freedom, all that good stuff, but you believe that consumers or citizens should be protected, which is why you want the government sort of to be involved. Is that the only reason?
That's pretty much the main reason, right? And I want, you know, other individuals' pursuit of financial gain and their pursuit of financial gain in this capitalist system not to be squandered because they can't penetrate a market that's been completely monopolized.
So then that's my next question, because it kind of circles back around. A free market requires competition. without interference. There is no such thing as a competition if there's barriers in place. It is because a competition is supposed to be fair and everybody is supposed to play fair game, which is why I'm like antitrust laws. But why do you still classify it as a free market, or like why do you even call it like capitalism if the government is allowed? And this is not meant to be like criticizing anything. I really truly want to understand where you're coming from. How can it be a free market if the government is allowed to place all these stipulations and regulations on what people can and cannot do? Big businesses, small businesses, corporations, it does not matter. Where is the free market competition at if the government is allowed to regulate the entire market based off how they feel, or how a certain group of people feel? Like, my concern with that is like, even, like with politicians, like Democrats and people on the left, like, oh, I don't like that, and the free market is doing this. So the federal government is like, I'm going to put this in place. I'm going to put these laws in place. And you have people on the right who do identify as state capitalists, who do want to trample on people. So they start to, support like different laws and policies so I feel like it goes both ways. But I guess the whole, like, what is the point of government? That's what I just want to understand. It. I just don't see the benefit, because I see what you're saying. I do, for the protection. But what is the government protecting? Like the economy right now, they're protecting absolutely nothing. For the past 200 years, they protected absolutely nothing. So I'm like, and like I said, maybe I'm just cynical of the government, but why are we still holding on to them in a free market economy? They're doing absolutely nothing. I mean, you're talking about protection.
They're doing a lot of bad right now because federal spending's out of control, inflation's out of control. They're essentially stealing from us. I agree with all of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's ridiculous. Inflation's essentially another tax, right? Because, like, yeah, you're not necessarily giving your money to them, but they're devaluing what you
have. Yeah, and they just raised the debt ceiling too. Don't forget about that.
What was that?
They just raised the debt ceiling, so don't forget about that too.
Yeah, they always raise the debt ceiling. It's like every month it's a new debt ceiling. Yeah, like, why even have one if you're just going to keep raising it? That's right. A whole separate issue though, and I think that's really a bigger issue. What I will say is that the government is destroying our economy right now, but it's not because of antitrust laws and things that protect consumers. It's because of other things like out of control government spending, like providing these subsidies to corporations and giving them another leg up that they don't even need.
So you just made the argument that government create monopolies, essentially. They create the powerhouses and the structures that you're like, you oppose of.
In a way, yes, they have, and they shouldn't be.
That's interesting. So help me understand. If you believe that, how do you simultaneously hold the other views that you have of government protecting?
Okay, because it could happen without government interfering. Those companies were there. They were already monopolies before the government, helped them out even more. It was already bad. And then they're just like, okay, well, we're going to bail you out now on top of all of that.
Okay, that's interesting. So I want to know how this will work in terms of, because I know we mentioned, like, we talked about, I mentioned like law enforcement and police in the beginning, because I do think we should privatize police. I want to know your perspective on privatizing the entire like law enforcement industry. How do you feel about that? And how do you think that could look in a laissez-faire economy or a state capitalist economy when it comes to police?
So with the police, I don't know like exactly how you could, like, how could they enforce the laws of a nation if they're privatized, if they're not bound by, the government of a nation? How can they enforce the laws?
I kind of want like a return to like federalism, where power and like sovereignty is given back to individual states. So that's kind of,
okay. I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with
that. My solution probably would not be liked because, like I said, I'm really like an anarcho-capitalist, an anarcho-libertarian, but to kind of find a common ground.
Yeah.
I honestly, I would support, returning back to federalism, but I agree.
I
see a lot of
out of states, they should have no jurisdiction in states.
Yeah. So that's hopefully that answers your question. I think that's how power can, because I don't think, the issue with politics and government today, they try to create all these federal policies and bills. They try to create all these one size fits all, these one glove solutions for an entire group of, like, an entire nation. It's like, that's not how that works. Some nations require more police, and some communities require more police than others. some less. Some communities don't want police. I've met communities and people who come from communities who are like, I don't want law enforcement here. So I think, we should, and police officers are underpaid anyway. They always talk about how they're underpaid. So why not privatize them and have them work for who they want, when they want, how, all that good stuff. But I think, police have too much power, just like our courts and Supreme Court have too much power. All our
Oh, I agree.
powerhouses.
And the problem is our police officers aren't held to a higher standard when they should.
And they get immunity. I'm also against that because the government grants them immunity. And it's like, these are regular American citizens in blue uniforms. What makes them any different? I understand that they have a badge on in a blue uniform, but why are they getting immunity? I've seen so many videos of cops online, planting like cocaine and, all kinds of narcotics in people's trunks. And, and the fact that, all it takes for a police officer to just come to your house is a piece of paper given by the court. I have a warrant, so I'm just going to come in. That is so like, I'm so I'm against that. Like, I don't support that.
If you privatize the police, then how do the police ever search a house when they have to try to bust a crime?
Wait, one more time.
They have to. If let's say a murder has happened and they have to search the house. Where do they obtain a warrant, or can they just go inside? Like, how would that work? Like, and who would be giving them a warrant?
So I'll answer that question, but this is my first. Before I answer that question, why does the government have a right to come into my home when they feel like it?
I mean, it's not necessarily when they feel like it. It's more, when a crime has happened, when the law has been violated. They have to come in. If somebody gets killed, if I call the police and something's happening in the house next door to me, I would want them to be able to go in and check it out.
I guess how I would solve this, I think we should, like I said, we should privatize it. We should give the power of the individual, poverty and sovereignty back to the states. And I think the states should pretty much go about how they want to deal with it, because I think the states
already have a lot of power over their respective police departments. Like you have the state police department, and then each municipality has their own police department as well. So I think it's the system's good in that sense, but I also think there needs to be a more check on power. I think.
I want to answer your question, so nobody in the comments say that, oh, he didn't answer your question. So this will be my solution to it, because I hate giving objective answers for complex things, but There are tons of people in America. I'm sure you're familiar with the ACAB, All Cops Are Bad movement. The defund the police movement. There are people who are anti-police. There are people who are pro-police. I don't have a right to tell anybody how to feel about a police, which is why I said we should return back to like federalism and give power back to the states. But I think if like California doesn't want to have police officers, I think they should be allowed not to have police officers. If Georgia or Texas want to have police officers, I think that they should be able to have police officers. I think that's why I said, it should be based on, because, and this ties into like democracy. We think that all people have to abide by these certain laws and rules and this entire power structure. Everything doesn't fit for everybody. Everything, it doesn't make everybody comfortable. But there are people who don't like police. So do you not think they have the right to live in an area or some sort of country or state where it's like, zero police or zero like law enforcement regulated? Do you not think that people should have that choice?
No, because I feel like that really doesn't work, because why would you, if you have no police, right, and all hell breaks loose in California somewhere, maybe some people support that. But then there's going to be other people who are there that are having their rights trampled on. You're going to have, people, they're getting their houses broken into. They're getting their own property stolen from them.
Which is why you move somewhere that's pro-police.
I just feel like that's just not practical. Like, there's always going to be somebody. I think most people in most places, and I feel like even in California, the majority of people don't want no police. Maybe they want to see less police funding. I think that's a very, very small minority of people that want no police. And if they want complete anarchy.
Oh, please. There's an entire movement, like millions, like all the ACAB people. There's millions that support that.
Well, yes. But if you go state by state, they're not the majority.
And I don't want to say that I'm making it like an objective claim, but I think that's just my like anarchy side speaking. You know, I do believe that people should have a choice in what power they subjugate themselves to. You know, if you want to live in a society regulated by law enforcement, then do so. You have that right. If you want to live in a society that's not regulated by law enforcement, then I think you should have that right. But I think now we're talking about like social slavery to the point where we think we should have complete power, like structures regulating everybody and everything in sight. Like, are people, is it not a right anymore to have an option? Like, where is the freedom? Where is the liberty that we always talk about? Like, do people not have an option? I think options should always be available when it comes to things like economics, politics, government, like I said, police, education. I think an option should always be available within those things, because those are things that impact people's lives on tremendous levels. So that's why I say what I say. But
like, and here's just to kind of close, because I know we're running out of time, but if you do have a portion of the country, right, that is lawless, that you have no police officers and crime is rampant, how do resources get in and out of there? How do companies, right, when you have massive food companies, delivering things to grocery stores, resources into those places, why would they want to go into those places if their trucks could be looted, stolen from? I just feel like it's not practical, and it's not smart to have a portion of the country that has no laws, because eventually,
I see what you're saying, but we also have
things can happen. It could either, that could go down where you have people who have to pass through there are getting mugged, and then or what you could happen is, okay, we're not going to bring any resources there, and then it's basically this lawless land where there's no prosperity and nobody has access to anything.
But see, that's what I don't get about conservatives sometimes. It's like part of them are like sometimes like lawless, but sometimes it's like lawful. Like, we're like gun control should not exist. Government should not regulate guns and gun ownership. But then another side is like, oh, we need government in this and we need government in this, but we don't need government in this. It's like, it's a mixture, and it's like you sometimes I just don't think the two can coexist, because you cannot have elements of lawlessness and then have elements of like lawfulness. Like, part of like half of it is like, the laws over here and we got to abide by this, but we're not going to abide by this. And it, like, even you mentioned about like products and stuff. Like, I even think that's a big issue when it comes to government and police and with products. For example, I'm a huge advocate for like the legalization of marijuana. The fact that police officers have the power to just come into your home because they smell marijuana, that's a big issue. That's a big issue.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's one thing that our country is actually trending in the right direction on, is that, state by state, it's being decriminalized, fully legalized, and eventually it's going to be legal in all 50 states. That's only a matter of time.
And I think to kind of end it, I think my biggest concern was pretty much, especially with like police officers and like law enforcement, I guess pretty much having the power to enter your private property on things that, like marijuana possession, or, just little things like that. Like, why do you have the right to come into my home because you smelled me like smoking pot outside of my window?
No, they should. That I agree with you on. But there are certain things that, like, that they might have to come into the house, like if a murder or a sexual assault or a rape, or I mean, I would want law enforcement being able to control those things.
I think so too. This was a good conversation. I actually think we probably need to make a part 2 eventually, because I think there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. There's so many different aspects.
So before everybody in the comments start making like complaints and stuff, we're not done with this conversation. If you're down for it, we'll do a part 2 to this, and get more into like government and like society and how this should work. But I think this was a great conversation, and
it was good.
I think you made some valid points, and you were able to pretty much, because I was a bit confused as to like conservatives always talk about this and that, but they want like, you pretty much like fixed all the concerns. So I have a better understanding of, what you believe. I still disagree though, but I'm sure you disagree with me. So
yeah. And that's fine. That's the beauty of this country on any topic.
I don't like government, so I'm sorry, not sorry.
I don't like government either. I don't want
you like them a little bit. You like them a little bit. Just
I
leave.
like, I 90% of government I hate, but 10% is okay.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thanks, Dylan, for coming on. And like I said, we'll try to plan a part 2 eventually. But thank you. Breaking the monolith out. You have a nice day.